Hello and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty Podcast. I hope you're all doing well on this fine evening. Eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed no Liam tonight. He is busy. I think it's his brother's birthday or something like that, so we'll let him off. But joining me, I have one of my favourite people within the Dynasty community. He has got the best voice, I think, as Kev from the Fantasy Wildcard put it in the Dynasty circles. He is host of the Dynasty Drive Podcast. He is a writer for the NFL Draft Bible over on SI, and also more recently writer for FantasyPros. Of course, joining me is Anthony Corrente, or as you may know him, at Dynasty Drive. How you doing, Anthony?
Good, Rich. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for the lovely intro. Makes me. Kev's always too kind about the voice. I said it again earlier. I was like, "That's too kind, my friend. Too kind."
It's fantastic to have you on. I think it's the second appearance on the show. I
think so. Yeah.
I feel like I do this every time we get a guest on. I can never remember how many times people are on. I need to get a better spreadsheet that keeps track of how many appearances. But yeah, it's fantastic to have you back on. I know that obviously love your work and love your thoughts and stuff. So before we kind of dive into the main topic of the show, what we like to do when we get guests on is really almost a bit of an intro to you as such. So how did you kind of get into, I guess, playing kind of fantasy football and that sort of things, really?
I remember getting into it, I guess probably something like, try and do some quick math here, at least, that's probably like 13, 14 years ago, something like that, 14, 15 years ago. And, being like a diehard, especially professional football fan and a pretty big college fan at the time, and started out just playing redraft like I guess most people probably do. But a buddy of mine was like, "Hey, you would love this," and was instantly hooked and went from, a league that year to more leagues the next year to now, just like everybody else who's probably watching or listening, like an unhealthy amount of leagues, because you can always justify it by their dynasty leagues. There's not that much in-season activity, right? You don't have to worry about waivers. But yeah, I guess probably something like 14, 15 years I've been playing fantasy in some aspect. More recently, pretty heavily focused on, dynasty and Devy, still with some redraft mixed in, but I feel like I'm not the redraft player I used to be.
Yeah, I think it tends to be the way people go, isn't it? Is that you sort of, dangle your toes in the water, start playing a bit of dynasty, and then once you get fully hooked, it's difficult to then go back, isn't it? And I think for me, the only redraft leagues I play now are essentially the big charity tournaments and things like that, and my one home league, and then pretty much everything is now dynasty.
Yeah, agreed. It's the tournament, the charity stuff, and like the last hanging on home leagues, and we'll get those converted to dynasty eventually. Everybody, we'll turn everybody.
See, my problem was that my home league, we started a dynasty but kept the redraft, so now we're doing both. So yeah. And then how did you kind of turn the kind of fantasy football love, the dynasty love, into what we see now? And as you were saying earlier, plenty of fingers in plenty of pies at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds funny because I think I can credit my wife a lot with like starting the podcast, because I thought for a long time, oh man, it'd be awesome to do a podcast like years back, and then just never really did anything about it. Right. And then saw, or heard a million podcasts about a million different things over the years, and kind of always harbored a little bit of sour grapes. Like, oh, I should have started a podcast. I could have had a cool podcast. And then towards the beginning of all this coronavirus craziness, I was like, my wife finally gave me the push, like, just do it. Like, just start the podcast. And I did. So that's why, like, I've told people before who ask for advice about starting a podcast, like, literally the best advice I can give anybody is just do it. And then from there, I mean, that was, I guess we're going on, I forget, 2 or 3 years, but was doing the podcast for a little bit. Zach Patra over at the Dynasty Draft Room at the time, who's obviously now with Draft Bible, gave me the opportunity to write a little bit. And those guys do awesome work covering the draft, Dynasty. I learned a lot from a lot of awesome people over there. So still like to do some writing there. And then, like you said at the beginning, most recently with FantasyPros, which is, the novelty hasn't worn off on that yet. Seeing your name come up on a site you use still pretty regularly. But they've got a great thing going, and I'm happy to be a small part of it. So hopefully I can keep chipping in a variety of ways, as many places as I can. It's Dynasty offseason, which feels like the regular season, right? We're all churning away with all the big stuff.
Exactly that. It's time to get stuck into work. It's amazing hearing you talk about how you started the podcast, because that's pretty much almost word for word sort of my story. And,
right.
Wished I'd done it for a while. Finally got the push from the wife once we were in lockdown and things, and haven't really looked back since then, basically. So I think we're probably not alone.
Yeah, you know what that means. It's both of our wives were clearly tired of hearing us talk about fantasy football to them. They were like, just go talk into a microphone to somebody else about all of this stuff.
Exactly that. My wife actually said to me the other day, she was like, "Oh, since you've started the podcast, it's been the best thing, because you don't talk to me about football at all, because you've just got loads of other people to talk to." I was like, yeah, okay. All right, I understand now why you pushed me into it. So diving into the show for this week. So getting Anthony on, what we're going to talk through is some of our kind of biggest sell candidates. Obviously, we get into the off season and it's buy all rookies and sell all old players. But I think that there can be a little bit of nuance, and sometimes you can kind of read into it a little bit more. So I asked Anthony to pick out 3, and we're going to walk through his with me throwing in a couple of my own. So let's start at the top. Anthony, who's your number 1 sell candidate right now?
Start spicy, right? Nothing like starting with a guy who just finished at the top of his game. And I should quantify this by saying this is not like must sell cheap, get out by any means necessary. But I am, if I'm rostering him, willing to float offers out there or put it out there that I'm willing to sell Cooper Kupp. And I love the player. I love, obviously, what he did this year. He's still a top 5 option for me in terms of dynasty wide receivers. But I just think that in terms of what the potential haul could be for a guy like that, where you're probably talking about multiple picks and probably young players at the same position. And Kupp is great. I mean, there's nothing to not like about, almost 150 catches, almost 2,000 yards, and over 15 touchdowns. But there's bound to be some regression there. There always is. It's tough to sustain a kind of pace like that, even in that offense, or even with a quarterback like Stafford. He'll be going into his age 29 season, I believe. So he's not the youngest guy. And I don't buy into, you have to sell every old player. I just think this is kind of the perfect storm of he's a high-level player who's going to be highly sought after by some people right now. And if I can get an absolute king's ransom for him, say something like, multiple firsts plus a guy like that I feel really good about, or even a high first plus a guy like T. Higgins and maybe some mid-round stuff, I'd be interested in seeing what exists out there in terms of big offers like that. Not in a rush to sell them cheap, but if for the Godfather offer, I'm kicking the tires on it.
Fantastic. And do you think that, I guess my concern with a player like Cooper Kupp that's getting up there in age and, coming off a record-breaking historic season, they almost, I feel sometimes almost become like a consensus sell. Do you think that almost people in your leagues are almost expecting you to try and sell Cooper Kupp, so it brings that price down a little bit?
I think in some leagues, yes. I think he's the perfect example of a player where it's like, if you're playing in a league strictly with people, from Twitter, like, yeah, you probably have a tough sell. If it's a home league or, I have a hard time sometimes separating the fact that not all leagues exist on Twitter, right? Where we kind of all live in the same echo chamber where tons of people will probably think the same thing. So I think the biggest part of it is knowing your league and how somebody else might value them. But I think, I don't know, I think even despite the age, you can find a buyer, I think, in a lot of places for a guy that almost put 2,000 yards up, and the team should look to run most of it back, like return most of those pieces there.
Yeah, I think, look, for me, I'm always on board with selling any player at peak value. And I think that even if Cooper Kupp, basically you carbon copied this season into next season and he broke all records again and had the overall wide receiver 1 finish, I can't see, it sounds ridiculous, but I can't see him breaking into my top 6 dynasty wide receivers. He's currently my wide receiver 7 because I think that, he'd then be going into his age 30 season. It's like the thing with these type of players is you're not selling because of their production's going to fall off a cliff, but their value is only ever going to decline because of where they're at in age.
Right.
And even if he has that incredible season, he's not going to go up in price. So the only place for him to go is down. So I completely agree with you in terms of selling him. My one kind of caveat is I think you have to be really smart about how you go about selling him. Because I think that if you just, do that kind of, people are probably fed up of me ranting about it, but you just stick him up on your trade bait, or on Sleepy, you stick him on the trade block and I'm selling Cooper Kupp. Then everybody's automatically just dropping the price because they know you're trying to get out on him.
Let the garbage offers roll right in, baby.
Exactly. I think you need to be really smart in terms of targeting someone that is very much in win now mode.
Yes.
And for me, the way I go about doing this is people will talk about, everybody's in win now mode. But I think the easiest way to do it is go and see who doesn't have their 2023 first. Because anybody who doesn't have their 2023 first needs to win in 2022. Okay, so go and target those people. And I think that if you can kind of manipulate the conversation around buying somebody on their team and selling them Cooper Kupp rather than just selling Cooper Kupp, I think you can get that absolute haul for him as you described. And I think if you can make that move, that's incredible. But I just think he's the type of player that you almost need to kind of Jedi mind trick people into the fact that you're selling him. Because I think if you try to sell him, you're only the price is going to plummet, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Once you hang the sign out there and say, I'm selling a lightly used Cooper Kupp. Everybody will for sure give you low ball offers. I agree with looking for somebody that's already missing their 23 first, because they're obviously in it to win it now. And I agree with you wholeheartedly about trying to find somebody that you got to find the right roster that has a player that's young somewhere that you really like as a target. Like, picks aside, I would want somebody young that I feel good about, whether it's a wide receiver or a running back that, maybe hasn't risen to full prominence yet. So I don't know, who that wide receiver is. Depends on somebody's roster, of course, but, throw somebody like Darnell Mooney into the mix, where if it's Darnell Mooney plus, all the draft capital, that's something I really like. Let the other team feel like they're getting the best receiver in the deal while I still get a young wide receiver I feel very good about, plus the draft capital.
Yeah, I think the obvious move, we could sit here and we could say, target Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Elijah Moore, but everybody's kind of alert to that move, aren't they? Sell the stud for the young stud plus a pick. I think, I really like the idea of shopping a little bit cheaper in terms of the wide receiver, but you get that extra draft capital to kind of recompense yourself. Even I think I seem to talk about him almost every week, but Rashad Bateman seems to be the forgotten man in terms of sophomore receivers, and I think that if you can get him plus first plus probably a little something else, I think that would be a great move.
Yeah, I agree.
So moving on to my first sell. So I feel like I might be angering kind of the Twitter hornet nest right now with who I'm going to throw out there. But for me, I just think that sometimes we go a little bit too early with overhyping players and kind of get obsessed with a little flash, or this team's going to move on from this player, so this player automatically becomes a stud. It's going to be Javonte Williams. Look, I love the player. I love the situation. I think Melvin Gordon is likely gone. I think Javonte Williams should take over the majority of that backfield, but I'm not convinced. And I just think the way he's being priced now is honestly terrifying to me. In current DLF ADP, he's the RB5. He's going ahead of Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler. You can name whoever you like. He's, I'm just scared off at the price. And I think for me, potentially, is this an opportunity to sell high? It could well be. I could be sitting here with egg on my face. He has a Jonathan Taylor like year 2 and he's incredible. But I just worry that he is never going to be a true bell cow in this offense. I think that if they let Melvin Gordon go, I think they're going to bring in a complement, whether it be in free agency or the draft. And I just love the player, but I'm concerned at the price. What do you think, Anthony?
I have I love Javonte Williams, and the issue I have with him, I think, lies pretty much in lockstep with where you are, that if I was able to draft Javonte a year ago or in rookie drafts, I'm glad I have him, and in the right situation would probably consider, trading high for an absolute monster offer if somebody buys into him being, the next Jonathan Taylor. The part that gets tough is I don't want any part of trading for him. If I have to go acquire him, I don't want to actually pay what it would cost for me to sell him. You know what I mean? So it puts you in kind of a weird predicament. I love him as a player. He's my running back 4. So I do have him rated quite highly. But the uncertainty given, I don't think Melvin Gordon will be back, but it doesn't mean that somebody else won't be there. And that uncertainty does, leave a little bit of uneasiness. I could definitely see selling him if you get the monster haul. The interesting thing is for me with Javonte Williams specifically, and I think some other players that get, touted around once their ADP moves up on DLF or, where they're ranked on Keep Trade Cut. It's I never see anybody actually paying the price. You know what I mean? So I don't know if it's just that we've all arrived at, okay, Javonte Williams is going to be ranked somewhere between running back 3, running back 5, depending on where you look or what ADP. But how often is somebody trading the multiple first for him? I'm sure it's happening, but it's just, I feel more often than not, I see people trying to sell without the buyer.
Yeah, no, and I think it's difficult because when a player gets to this point in kind of dynasty value, you don't tend to see him moved because right. I think that, let's be honest, everybody's wanting that sophomore running back that is ridiculously priced. You're more likely to see more Jonathan Taylor trades this offseason than you did last offseason as such. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you that it's difficult to see kind of loads of kind of trades. I've just dived onto the DLF trade finder because I thought rather than let's speak in kind of theoreticals, let's dive in and see some real trades. So these are recent trades. So 25th of January. So when was that? Okay, so that was almost a month ago. Someone paid 2 firsts and a second for Javonte Williams and Braxton Berrios. Hard to see that Braxton Berrios was a deal breaker in that trade. And then, so 16th of February, somebody traded Javonte Williams for Hunter Renfrow, a first, a second, a third, a fourth, and the 204 in this draft. So really a first and 2 seconds and Hunter Renfrow. And that's it in terms of trades on the DLF Trade Finder in the last month. So that's all trades done on myfantasyleague.com in the last month is 2.
I absolutely smashed the second one if I'm trying to trade for Javonte Williams. Hunter Renfrow, a 1 and 2 twos, call it?
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely. So yeah, I think you're probably right in that nobody's selling Javonte Williams, nobody's buying. So maybe that's why he becomes a sell, because I think that price is just. I really like the player. He's my dynasty RB6 currently. Yeah. I'm just concerned about that price. I think that sometimes as a dynasty community, we get ourselves into kind of hot water by buying into limited production in younger players too quickly. And I think that, yes, sometimes you do that. If you bought into Jonathan Taylor after that flash at the end of his rookie year, absolutely incredible. You're sitting back laughing right now. But if sometimes dive in and buy a guy that flashes in their rookie year and then eventually goes on to be kind of nothing. So yeah, I'm concerned about Javonte Williams. And as you said, if I can get, 2 firsts plus, if I can buy, if I can get a guy that I had ranked higher coming out in Travis Etienne, plus a first, maybe even something else, I'd be very happy to make that move.
Yeah, that one would be tempting. I agree, because I had Etienne higher than him coming out as well. Unrelated, but Etienne's a smash buy for me all off season long.
Absolutely.
Buy the injury dip while it's still there.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah, in the last 3 years, Travis Etienne is in my rookie model, he's the second highest player behind only Jonathan Taylor. So he's a 90th percentile player in my rookie model since 2003.
Yeah.
And Javonte Williams is a 71st percentile, just to give you kind of how much higher on Etienne I was than Javonte Williams. So your second sell then, Anthony?
My second sell is Cleveland Browns running back Nick Chubb. And I like Nick Chubb, but I feel like I never quite like Nick Chubb as much as some other people out there. Nick Chubb to me I don't think his value is far off from where he's often like ranked or drafted. I'm pretty much fine with that. I view him as like a back end RB1. I think right now I have him as the running back 12 in my rankings. So as back end RB1 as you can get. My problems with Nick Chubb is I feel like more often than not, I'm in a league where somebody values him more than I do. And he is a second contract running back going into his age 27 season on a team that, while they love to run the ball and while he is great at it, uses a variety of guys. And Kareem Hunt's still under contract there. I know he was banged up last year, but we saw Dearness Johnson pitch in work when Chubb was out or when Hunt was out. It's not that I think Nick Chubb is due to fall off a cliff and, be a 900-yard running back or anything like that. I think he'll be pretty good to great. A running back that'll get you 1,100, 1,200 yards, close to double-digit touchdowns, and limited work in the passing game. But if I'm in a league where somebody values him like a mid-range RB1 or, even higher than that, because some people just view him as, most talented runner in the league and are banking on the fact that that expansion into more of the passing game will be there. And I just don't think that's true. I think that the Browns really like Kareem Hunt. I quite like Kareem Hunt as well for that team. And I think it's telling that when Kareem Hunt's healthy, he's often on the field in kind of high pressure situations where the team is putting him out there because they trust him. They don't trust Nick Chubb, but the value disparity between those two players is, I think, much greater than it should be at times. So again, not that I don't like Chubb. I think it's just a situation or an instance of me being slightly lower than consensus on a guy, where if I could take my back end RB1 and flip him for, a first plus another guy, or even some mid-round picks, depending on the context or makeup of my team, I'd probably consider selling Chubb. It's just right or wrong at running back. I'm always a little more uneasy with the age thing than I am with a wide receiver like Cooper Kupp or, any of these aging wide receivers. How long do we get RB1 Nick Chubb for? Like, how long past 27 does that last?
Yeah. I think as soon as you put this guy on the show sheet, I started licking my lips because Nick Chubb, so I've just started writing for DLF. Nick Chubb was the topic of my very first article over there. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, yes, we get to dive into Nick Chubb some more.
Perfect.
So yeah, I'm kind of 50-50 on Nick Chubb at the moment, which I appreciate isn't a great opinion for a podcast, but basically I agree with everything you've said. It's their second contract is concerning. I think the fact that, as you said, there is somebody in every league that is a Nick Chubb stan as such and is obsessed with him. My concern is I think that Nick Chubb, whilst being an incredible NFL running back, from a fantasy perspective, he is very good, but he is not great. And that is largely because his receiving usage is non-existent. If you look at the splits between him and Kareem Hunt, it doesn't even matter when Kareem Hunt's not there. The Browns still don't use Nick Chubb in the receiving game.
Right.
So people saying Kareem Hunt could get cut this offseason, he's got no dead cap hit. That doesn't matter. Nick Chubb's suddenly not going to become a receiving back. He averages 1.8 targets a game when Kareem Hunt is in the game, is playing and active, and he averages 2.9 targets when he's not. So, yes, it's an extra target game, but that's not anything to get particularly excited about. I think for me, I'm a little bit less concerned, and I'm one that is usually looking to get out of running backs a year before they hit that second contract, because I think, quite frankly, we'll always be selling running backs. But right. I think I'm a little bit less concerned about Nick Chubb hitting that cliff of Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, because that Cleveland Browns offensive line is incredible. Okay, they have got 4 elite options in terms of the 2 guards and the 2 tackles. I think are both elite at their positions. I think JC Tretter I need to check his contract situation, but I'm pretty sure he's back for another year. And he's an above average center, quite frankly. That offensive kind of system is built around Nick Chubb running the ball. And I really believe that that's going to happen for the next 2 years. So I'm not concerned about him falling off a cliff, because I think he will have that kind of managed uses moving forward. He's not a Todd Gurley or Le'Veon Bell where he is the offense. And I think that he's also not a Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell where he's being held up as overall RB1, overall, number 1 player in 1 QB fantasy leagues, that's then going to suddenly completely drop off a cliff. I think the price at the moment for Nick Chubb is, as you said, he's in that back end RB1 price range. And I feel comfortable that's probably where he's going to fit for the next 2 years. So I think that, in a long-winded way to say, I completely agree with what you're saying. If you can sell Nick Chubb to somebody that is completely obsessed with Nick Chubb and thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread and, the greatest running back in the league, and get an absolute haul, go for it. But outside of those people, I'm not sure that price is there, because I don't think he has that elite league-winning upside. I think if he's your RB1, chances are you're probably not winning the league. If he's your RB2, you're in a really good position.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's I agree, good time to sell, but it's got to be that right price again.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is an interesting scenario with him, though, where I feel like almost more than any player, every league has one. Every league's got somebody all in on Nick Chubb.
I think it's that I'm going to be a little bit disparaging now, but I think it's that a lot of people kind of have an ego, and a lot of people think that they know more than other people. And I think that people who sit there and watch the NFL are like, this guy's incredible, okay? And he is absolutely incredible. And it's like, I can see the talent. I can see the usage. You can see everything with Nick Chubb. But the ceiling from a fantasy side isn't there, because he doesn't get that receiving usage. And I think that the person that values Nick Chubb over the top, as you say, in every league, and honestly, every league I'm in has one, it's that person that is perhaps a little bit kind of thinks they know more and thinks they can watch film and watch a game and draw out more than somebody who doesn't. And I think that those are the people that, hold up Nick Chubb as kind of the holy grail.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I don't want to give too much away, but the lack or the, never seeing the increase in production in the passing game will tie into one of my other guys as well.
Save that one for a little bit. And I'm going to dive into my second sell. And it's perhaps it's a little bit of a theme outside of Javonte Williams, but it's going to be Stefan Diggs. I think that at the moment, his current ADP, he's wide receiver 11. He's coming off a top 3 finish in 2020, and I think the wide receiver 7 finish in 2021. He is at the moment kind of a very solid, reliable, safe wide receiver, back end wide receiver one, who's basically copy and paste what we said about Nick Chubb, and you can say it about Stefan Diggs, is that he's solid, but I'm concerned. He's now 28. He's getting up there in age, and I just don't think that the ceiling is there for the price you're having to pay. So I think that for me, it's a get out while you still can, because I think that, again, like I said about Cooper Kupp, even if he has an incredible season where he finishes as, just like in 2020, where a top 3 receiver, I don't think his price increases. I think he'd be going into his age 29 season, and we'd probably see him as a back end wide receiver one in terms of ADB and value. And so for me, it's basically what we said about Cooper Kupp. Get out now if you can make basically the similar moves that we talked about Cooper Kupp, and kind of pivot to a younger player and kind of hopefully have something that can appreciate in value. Whereas for me, with Stefan Diggs, the only place he can go is down.
Yeah, I have a long-standing thing with Stefan Diggs where I was super wrong after he went to Buffalo, like hand up, as wrong could be. I'm pretty sure if we dig back through old podcast episodes that I'm probably on recording saying I wouldn't have traded like a 2nd-round rookie pick straight up for Stefan Diggs. I was fade Stefan Diggs at all costs when he first went to Buffalo, and egg on my face, was wrong. He was great and was still very good last year. I agree that it's probably a sell while you can situation, because I think you're spot on with it. He's not going to appreciate in value anymore, right? Like that probably happened last offseason for the last time, where he had that big first year in Buffalo. The value went up a little bit, and now it's probably holding or starting to fall. Yeah, I mean, it really is like copy and paste what we said about Nick Chubb. I view him as a safe, steady back-end wide receiver one that I'd feel great about if he was my wide receiver 2 going into the season. Out of curiosity, would you rather have straight up Stefan Diggs or T. Higgins?
I've got them back to back.
Perfect.
I've got Stefan Diggs ahead. I think if I was in a league, this is going to sound like a completely ridiculous take, but if I was in a league, I think I'd prefer Stefan Diggs. If I was in a startup, I'd take T. Higgins.
That makes sense. Startups are wonky. You gotta get your guy in startups.
Yeah, I think the thing with Stefan Diggs is that I'm a little bit concerned that the 2020 season was massively buoyed because he saw this, quite frankly, unsustainable target share.
Yes.
Where he was up above 30% for the entire year. We now go into 2021 where we see the emergence of Dawson Knox, Gabriel Davis in his 2nd year. They obviously brought in Emmanuel Sanders, which didn't do massive from a fantasy production standpoint, but did eat into that target share. And I think that last year he had a 26% target share, and I think that that's probably going to be the norm. And I think that the only reason people are holding him up at the price he is now is because people are looking at Buffalo and going, Cole Beasley's gone, Emmanuel Sanders has gone. That's 180 odd targets. Maybe Stefan Diggs can get back up to 30%. Whereas for me, I'm looking at it going, I think Gabriel Davis takes a step forward. I think Dawson Knox is going to see an increase in target share. And I am guaranteeing that there is going to be another option in this receiving game, whether it be that they spend a high draft pick, whether it be that they go and shop and, maybe an Allen Robinson or that type of receiver that's, slightly bigger bodied would fit in within that offensive scheme. And I think that also this offense as a whole probably takes a slight step back. Brian Dable has gone to New York. It's hard to see them kind of moving forward and not seeing a little bit of regression in terms of overall production. So I just don't see where the kind of case for Stefan Diggs to be essentially produced at a similar level. He's never really been a big touchdown guy. I actually got into this with not got into it, that sounds bad, but had a detailed conversation with Tom, one of my Patreons, in the Discord about basically Stefan Diggs. He gets a lot of red zone targets, and I think people hold him up as he's a good red zone weapon. But if you actually look at it, he gets a lot of targets between the 20 and 10, but actually his goal line targets or anything inside the 10 is really low. And therefore he doesn't score many touchdowns. Whereas you look at someone like a Mike Evans, now they have comparable kind of red zone targets, but actually Mike Evans gets kind of double or triple the amount of inside the 10 targets as Stefan Diggs does. And therefore Mike Evans scores loads more touchdowns than Stefan Diggs. And I think that that's sometimes where we look at red zone targets and they can be slightly misleading, because actually, getting a target from the 20-yard line is very different to getting a target from the 1, isn't it?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's a great point what you said that, excuse me, the rest of the offense probably steps into a slightly larger role, Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox, and I agree. I think somebody else will be there, whether it's, they bring in a guy like Robinson or, they shop in that second or third tier at free agency. Them going out and adding somebody like Emmanuel Sanders last year, even though it didn't work or produce, not that it didn't work, but didn't produce huge results, looks to me like they're obviously still interested in investing at the position. So whether that's in the draft, free agency, whatever, I would expect them to add another pass catcher as well. So I'm with you there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be shocked. Cole Beasley's gone, but I definitely think they're going to bring in another smaller slot type. I wouldn't be shocked if you saw Jameson Crowder or someone like that, where, he's produced in the division. They've seen up close and personal how good Jameson Crowder is. And I think that if you put him in an offense with Josh Allen, I wouldn't be shocked if Jameson Crowder was seeing a 20+% target share. And I think that, yes, Cole Beasley's gone, but Stefan Diggs isn't going to suddenly start running those short option routes that Cole Beasley's been running for the last couple of years. So that brings us quite nice. Actually, before we dive in, Anthony, before we dive into your last one, so Stefan Diggs, if you could pivot from him, and we talk about the young sophomore receivers and that kind of things, would you do Elijah Moore straight up, or would you need more on top?
I'd probably ask for more. I'd ask for more because I think you could probably get more from the other manager who has more, no pun intended. Yeah, if I could get Elijah Moore plus, and it doesn't even need, for me, it doesn't need to be Elijah Moore plus a first. Like, that'd be the icing on the cake. But I would do, I probably would take Elijah Moore in a early to mid second round pick for Stefan Diggs.
Yeah.
I'd rather have Jalen Waddle than Stefan Diggs, like definitely. Pretty easily. But yeah, if I could have somebody like, I probably, I don't know.
What about Devonta Smith?
It's exactly the name I was looking at. It's exactly the name I was looking at. I was about to say I'd probably take Devonta Smith straight up. I think I guess like context on like a specific team would be pretty important for me. But if it was a team that, needed some more of that youth, or if I had, okay depth at wide receiver, I'd probably do Devonta Smith for Stefan Diggs straight up.
Yeah, I think that's about the range I'm looking. I mean, I've got DJ Moore, Stefan Diggs, T. Higgins, Devonta Smith, all in the same tier.
Yeah.
Oh, and Chris Godwin's in there as well, actually. Sorry. So yeah, I'd quite happily pivot. If I'm buying back, what are we talking, 5-6 years by going and getting Devonta Smith, someone like that, I'm very happy making that move. Again, it's one of those, if I'm in a win now situation, I'm probably asking for something on top of Devonta Smith. But in a startup, I'm taking Devonta Smith over Stefan Diggs every time. So then you've teased it earlier, and I made you wait. But where are we going with your final dynasty sell?
My final sell is, oh my God, I forgot the new team name. Washington Commanders. That's right. I still want to call them the Washington Football Team. That's a better name.
I prefer the Washington Football Team.
Yeah. But, all right. The Washington Football Team running back Antonio Gibson. I was probably probably a little too bullish on Antonio Gibson last year. And I really bought into he's going to get the passing work. And that's what I thought would supplement his value to where this, top 5 was in the range of outcomes. I thought that we saw what he could do as a runner. We know what he's capable of as a receiver, both from college and when utilized in the pros. I don't think this team is ever going to involve him as a pass catcher with regularity the way that fantasy fans want him to. It was nearly about the same in 2 more games played in 2021 than it was in 2020. He had 44 targets in 2020, 52 targets in 2021 in 2 more games, 247 yards in 2020 to 294 in 2021. Not bad, but not, the huge uptick in receiving work that we thought he could be in line for. I think whether it's J.D. McKissic or somebody else, this team is going to keep another running back involved as a third down kind of back. And that really kind of kills Gibson for me a little bit. Not that I think he's a bad player, but I don't think his range of outcomes is that, mid-range RB1 like I did a season ago, with top 5 upside if he gets all the receiving work. I don't think he's going to get that. And while good as a runner, I don't think his efficiency is as great as a runner to really justify ranking him like a back-end RB1. For me, he's more of like a middling RB2 at this point. Just looking at it on Player Profiler, he was 51st in the league in true yards per carry, 47th in yards per touch. He's good. And I hate to ever use that like cop-out kind of explanation of a player. Like, he's good. He's fine. He's a good NFL player. But similar to what we said about Nick Chubb, I don't think he'll ever get that uptick in receiving work that could, hoist him or boost him all the way up into the upper echelon of running backs that we know will see fairly consistent usage in the passing game at a higher rate than what Antonio Gibson has seen for the Commanders. That is not easy to say. Washington football team. That's what we're calling them.
Yeah. So, honest answer now. How excited were you? Was it the week 1 game where J.D. McKissic wasn't active and you saw an obscene amount of targets? How excited were you after that game?
I thought, wheels up, baby. I was like, we are right. And then, J.D. McKissic was a thing all year long, huh?
Yeah. Well, I think it should, because J.D. McKissic got injured at the back end of the year, didn't he? And even then, yes, there was a couple of games where he got sort of 6 or 7 targets, but it never really kind of kicked on, and it's such a shame, because as a guy coming out, I was so excited about. I know that the head coach, who I'm completely blanking on, Ron Rivera, came out and compared him to Christian McCaffrey, but that was ridiculous and hyperbole. But I was so excited about, this is a guy that's a receiver. He is a very good route runner as a pure receiver. And I was like, this is a guy that's going to be a movable piece. He can go everywhere. He's going to be, lined up outside. He's going to get usage all over the place. And I was so excited about that. And then they've basically just gone, nah, you're a 2-down running back. And that's all you're going to do. And it just feels so deflating. I think, look, I think that for me, I completely agree with you. He's settled into this role where he's never going to be a 80-90% opportunity share. He's never even going to be an 80% kind of snap share. He only saw, I'm just looking at it now, he only saw over 80% of snaps in 1 game last year. And that was a game that J.D. McKissic didn't play. So I think that they're basically saying through 2 years, this is what Antonio Gibson is. And I don't think that if you're hoping for more, I think you're kind of letting yourself into kind of false projections, because I really agree with you. I think he's kind of at his ceiling, and I don't expect there to be anything more, unless, Ron Rivera suddenly has some sort of epiphany and says, oh, actually, we're going to start using him all over the field. I mean, price-wise, what would you need? If we're talking pure picks, what would you need to kind of move off him?
I'd probably sell him cheaper than most. But I also think I might like the running back group this year more than some others do. So if we're talking about 2022 picks, I'd probably push for a 1 and a 2 and maybe settle for something less than that. A first gets the conversation going, though. And if I can't get a second, maybe I settle for a first and a third, or a first and, a bench guy that, more like a true kind of buy low player, somebody that I still think has some upside that somebody else might just view as a throw in. But a first firmly gets the conversation going for me. I like the player. I really do. But just looking at DLF's ADP in January, like, I know that he is older and this is like the outlier of all outliers, but I'm not taking Antonio Gibson as the running back 13 ahead of Derrick Henry as the running back 16 in startups.
Yeah.
Which is another one where it's like, okay, I would do that in a startup. Am I going to go trade for Derrick Henry? No, probably not. But I also am not taking Antonio Gibson ahead of Cam Akers. Probably not ahead of Travis Etienne at this point.
I think that's the move I'm making. If I've got Antonio Gibson, if I can get Travis Etienne plus, which I think you can easily get a second on top. I think you can probably get more. But yeah, I really like the idea of moving on from Antonio Gibson. We've had a comment from Thomas Tipple who says the play was always sell Gibson the minute Rivera said the CMC gimmick, because every move they've made said he wasn't going to get that role.
Tom gets it. Hey Tom, how you doing?
He's hitting nail on the head there, isn't he? It's basically been, sell the hype. Quite frankly, I think it's always been slightly overhyped. Well, that concludes the show. But before you go, Anthony, I think I'm throwing this on you, so I appreciate I haven't given you any prep for this. But I felt we're getting, the Dynasty guy, the Devy guy. You hinted at the 2022 running backs there, so I thought, a quick kind of 2-minute overview. Who is it that you're really high on and really like in this year's class?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the 2022 running back class there's been this weird kind of, I don't want to say consensus, but this weird sort of take, like, fade 2022 because 2023 is going to be so good, headlined by, Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs and all those guys. But 2022, I'm very high on Isaiah Spiller. Isaiah Spiller is running back 1 for me. I like Isaiah Spiller a lot. I've used Spiller, Breece Hall, and Kenneth Walker kind of in a tier on their own, where it breaks a little bit after that. My running back 4 right now is Jerome Ford. And I think my 4 and 5 right now are Jerome Ford, and then 5 would be Kyron Williams. That's pre-combine, pre-draft, without knowing landing spots or draft capital, because that's kind of fluid for me. I think from a pure NFL perspective, I expect the league to value a guy like Jerome Ford a little bit more, who I think they'll feel better about putting into a like true 3-down kind of role, where Kyron Williams from Notre Dame, I think, is absolutely capable of that role. Despite being a smaller guy, I think he's a really tough runner inside. He can pass protect, he can catch. He really does have a 3-down skill set. But I just worry. I'm curious to see what he weighs in at, what he measures at, and if the NFL will invest day 2 draft capital in him. If they do, like if a team takes Kyron Williams in the 2nd or 3rd round, I mean, it's going to be tough for me to not put him back at running back 4 after that, because I really, really do like the player. From a pure, just like watching them on tape perspective, I gave him and Ford identical grades. I just expect the NFL to lean forward with more of a prototypical build and to kind of trust him in that kind of lead role. If they both go on day 2, it's a coin flip. Take who you like, but I think I might be a little bit higher on Ford than some others to this point. But it's an interesting class because there's more depth than I think people initially anticipated. And some of that depth is more of like the James Cook, receiving back variety. I know some people really like Rachaad White and think he can be kind of a 3-down back. Pierre Strong is somebody I really like as a sleeper later in rookie drafts, that from South Dakota State. I think he's got the size, the skill set, and if he lands in the right spot, could end up being a steal in rookie drafts. But hopefully you held on to some 2022 picks, because there are good players to be had, even though 2023 has been stealing headlines for a while.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been my thought process. I think it's almost been, as you said, consensus, fade 2022. It's all about 2023. But actually, yes, whilst it doesn't have that potential star star power. I think just from a numbers perspective, because of COVID and everything that happened, this draft class is 3 times bigger than last year's draft class, just in terms of total entrants. Like that as a whole there's going to be some more potential. There's going to be better depth. I've a couple of names there. I obviously need to go back and look at and review, because I'm a little bit lower than consensus on Jerome Ford, and I certainly value your opinion. So I need to go and have a look at that. And Isaiah Spiller is currently my RB3. So
who do you have first, Walker or Hall?
Breece Hall is Breece Hall in terms of kind of my rookie model and where I value him on the tape and that kind of thing. He's kind of head and shoulders above at the moment.
I think both Hall and Spiller, I like them both a very good amount. And I think both suffer from a little bit of like prospect fatigue, where it's like we've been talking about these guys for years already. So now that it's finally time for them to be here, sure, maybe they don't quite pop like, the ETNs or the Najee Harrises or the guys we expect to see next year. But they're good players, man. Also, I should mention Tyler Algier, just so Twitter doesn't come for me. I know Twitter loves Tyler Algier, so I'll just throw his name out there.
here's the last question I have for you, and then we'll get out of there, because there's one running back that is absolutely popping in my model, and from what I've seen, I really, really like. But it seems like I'm the only person that seems to like him, and certainly in the DLF circles, I'm sort of alone. So it's Tyler Badie out of Missouri.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let me look real quick on my doc and see where I had Badie at. I liked him a lot more than I expected to. When you see like the measurables, like 5'8", 194, whatever, I was like, I thought it was kind of going to be a little bit of throwaway film. But he really does pop. Like, he is very good. I actually, after I finished watching him, was texting in the group chat with Eric and Ryan that I do the Draft Bible podcast with, and Matt Hicks, saying, did anybody else kind of come away more impressed with him than they expected to? He's another guy that I think draft capital will be interesting for, like, to see how heavily a team invests off the back of this like big kind of workhorse year at Mizzou. But he's definitely got skills. He's got good speed, good short area quickness, and I think he can both like bounce it outside and run in between the tackles better than you'd expect for a guy that size. Pretty versatile receiver. Like, he's capable. He's definitely flying under the radar. And that's like, I think, the point of this running back class. Like, we've been talking about how good the receivers are, and they're great. But there's going to be some guys that go round 2 in rookie drafts, like Michael Carter did a year ago, or go round 3 in rookie drafts like Ramondre Stevenson did a year ago. And you got to be on the lookout for those guys, whether it's Tyler Badie, Tyler Algier, Brian Robinson from Alabama, who people won't prop up, but the NFL is going to love him because he's an Alabama running back. So you just got to see where some of these guys go. Hassan Haskins. There's good players. Go get some. Try and get some 2022 picks if you sold them.
I'm really excited about the number of 3rd and 4th round picks that I basically don't value at all. But I can just see myself only taking running backs in that round, because it feels like this is the kind of class where you could have, a player completely pop out of nowhere that was a 4th or 5th round pick in the NFL draft that goes into a situation that nobody sort of expects and then has an incredible camp and just comes out of nowhere. So, yeah, I'm going to take as many of those late round flyers on running backs as I can, certainly going into next year. So thank you ever so much for coming on, Anthony. It's been absolutely fantastic. I thoroughly enjoy getting you on, thoroughly enjoy having a good chat with you. It's always enjoyable. For the guys listening and indeed watching along, where can they find you? Where can they read your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Rich. Always nice to catch up and talk shop with you. You can follow me on Twitter at Dynasty Drive. There's new episodes of a podcast of the same name, the Dynasty Drive, every Friday, minus like the last 3 Fridays. I was on a little bit of a vacation, but that'll be back this week. You can catch new episodes of the Dynasty Draft Room, which I co-host with Ryan Searfoss and Eric Adams on the NFL Draft Bible Podcast Network every Wednesday. And all my written content is available with the NFL Draft Bible, which is si.com/NFL/draft. And now at FantasyPros as well. So there's like 3 or 4 articles in the work for FantasyPros that'll be out over the next month or so. everything from, rookie sleepers to players that are undervalued in the NFL draft, and some mock drafts as well, because who doesn't love a good mock this time of year? But yeah, that's everything. And Rich, I appreciate it. So I always love talking with you.
That is fantastic. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Listeners, before you go, a couple of quick teasers from me. So Listener League, obviously, we will postpone that for a week. We will be revealing the lucky people who have got those 4 lucky spots. Liam will be back next week to do that. And also, UK listeners, there is a very, very exciting announcement on Thursday at 12 noon. Make sure you're following @_UKFFC. We've got some very exciting news coming. So, look forward to speaking to you next week, and have a good one.